Welcome back to Tolkien with Friends, and honestly, I think today is going to be pretty short and sweet. What do you think, Kali?
I think so, but sometimes those are the best moments.
I know, yeah. So I've been wrong before, if I just keep talking. But today's chapter is pretty direct and to the point, and so is our 20 minutes of movie that we watch. And so today we are talking about chapter 11 on the Doorstep, which by following the events of the book, we really only have from an hour and 47 minutes in until like 2 hours and 5 minutes in. And that's when I stopped it. Of course, this is the extended edition. So there are parts in this that I don't remember from the theatrical, which I thought was kind of nice. And otherwise, pretty good time. So in both instances, this covers the point from when Thorin, Bilbo, and co., more or less, in the movie's case, leave Lake Town to the moment when Thorin opens the secret door on the side of the mountain. Of course, the movie of course the movie adds in a little bit more, and we'll get to that. So when we last left our crew in the movie, Fili, Kili, Oin, and Beaufort. Okay, here's also a question that I have. In my some copies of The Hobbit that I have had, they will put an accent mark over the O. And so when I first read it, I always called him Owen. But in some copies, he doesn't have an accent over.
Oh.
So I'm like, is he an Oin or is he an Owen? Or is he something else that I haven't considered completely?
I don't know.
Does your copy have that?
I'm trying to look now for if
I know, I'm like,
his name comes up.
Because obviously I have never really I've never harped on pronunciation like that. Like, you know who I'm talking about. Everybody knows who I'm talking about. You're crazy if you don't know who I'm talking about. But sometimes he has, or like those names, like, have the accent, and then other times they don't.
I like to make them kind of rhyme with each other because so if it's glowing, if it's gonna be glowing, then it should be Owen,
Right.
right?
Is it glowing?
Or is it glowing?
Right.
And oin and glowing. I don't like that as much.
I know. But I feel like some people do say it like that. Not that that's wrong or anything. I don't know what's correct is my point.
There's no accent in my book.
Mm.
It's just OIN.
Because I know when I was growing up, it 100% had one. And I know when you Google it, it'll have one sometimes. But not always.
Inconsistencies. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I don't know what Tolkien wanted, but... So what are we going with Owen? Like glowing?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do that.
Great. So everybody knows who we're talking about. Okay, so Fili, Kili, Owen, and Beaufort, in the movie, they have stayed behind in Lake Town because of Kili's wound.
Beaufort was just hungover, wasn't he? Was he just...
Yeah, he just overslept.
Just
and
overslept, my bad.
Yeah. Relatable king. Yeah, but he is there. So, in the book, of course, we know that all of the dwarves travel to Erebor together, and also noting that we do not see, like, Fili, Kili, and the crew reunite with the rest of our Erebor dwarves in this section of the movie, and as I think I've been pretty clear about, I don't remember all that much about the plot of the Hobbit movie, so I am interested to see how they reunite. Because I just don't remember it at all, and I don't really know how that would work, knowing the kind of the trek that it takes to get from Lake Town to Erebor.
I feel like they just show up and they don't explain it, but we'll find out in a couple of weeks, I guess.
All right, well, that is gross. We'll see. But what we do see, though, is Kili and co begging the master for help. He obviously turns them away, because, I mean, what else in this version?
He's a horrible man.
Of course. Yeah, he's very icky in the movie, and I don't really know if this had happened in the book, I don't really know if that would have been true, because he was very keen to be seen positively by the people of Lake Town, and they were all very much thinking positively about the dwarves and about, the legends and like them having gold running down the river. You know what I mean? So they were very hospitable to the dwarves in the book version. Obviously, it doesn't matter because that didn't happen. And so they go to Bard instead. And of course, Bard at first is like, no. But then, he's a good guy. He takes him in. And we don't really see them for the rest of this section, which I'm okay with. Because I know what's coming. And I just want to be on the record that I do not hate Tariel. I just hate the excessive use of Morgul, and I also hate that it's just the lovey-dovey stuff between them is like a little too heavy-handed, so like I'm okay with less of that. I did love Aidan Turner and Poldark though. Did you ever watch that show?
No, I heard about it.
You should watch that show. I
should
mean,
watch that.
Poldark is also kind of an asshole, but I really like, especially season 1, maybe some of season 2, but it's cute.
We'll add it to my watch list.
Yeah, do recommend. Aidan Turner's a cutie patootie in that. I'm like, I could take him or leave him as a dwarf, but as a guy from the 1700s, you bet. So we all know that subplot isn't doing it for me, and we don't really see it in this part, so that's cool. Then we get back to Thorin, Bilbo, and the rest of the team, and we're pretty much more or less on track with where we are in the book. The main difference as far as how they get there is like they do definitely row up the Long Lake and part of the running river, but they do meet some men from Lake Town on the shore with provisions, camping supplies, that kind of thing, and ponies.
And ponies.
And I'm not going to get into the ponies too much yet, but I do just want to mention the lack of ponies in the movie. Because they do become
schlepping it all over the rocks, and
they are It's very Lord of the Rings in that way. With the lack of the ponies.
Why provide them with another means of transportation when we can walk?
We could just walk. Who knows how long that took them? But they do have ponies in the book. I have a point of bringing that up, but I won't bring it up until we get to Smog meets the ponies. Do you want me to talk about it? Or
Kali just made a very sad face, and Andy laughed at it.
Do you want me to talk about the
ponies? Okay, I'm braced for it. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, my point being that we've already seen our group lose one group of ponies.
Oh, yeah.
And this group of ponies doesn't really fare any better, which I think is funny in comparison to how well our ponies do in Fellowship of the Ring, in the book, anyway. We don't have as many ponies in the Fellowship of the Rings movie. We do get Bill, and he does leave. They don't really ever like confirm that he's okay. I'm pretty sure that it is pretty close to the books in the Fellowship movie, so I'm pretty sure that he is okay. But in, both the ponies that they leave the Shire with in Fellowship, while they do, they end up working at the Prancing Pony for a while. And, also at one point when they lose them, Fatty Lumpkin finds them, and then they end up at Bree and, hang out with Hob and Nob for the rest of their days. And Bill, our bestie, our unofficial member of the Fellowship, he obviously is bought from Bill Ferny, and he travels with them all the way to Moria, and he is sent away, but he is such a clever little pony, and we are reunited with him by the end of the story. So I just think it's funny that, like, and also, like, with the whole wolf situation near Holland and stuff, like, Tolkien definitely had opportunities to murder these ponies, but it's almost like he feels bad about the ponies in The Hobbit, and therefore all ponies survive in Fellowship of the Ring. I don't know. It's just it's a headcanon that I have. So when I noticed that they didn't include the ponies, I was like, okay, I get it. Maybe they don't want to show Smaug eating ponies, but at the same time, ponies.
Yeah, and I guess I like lose track of them in the book. They were given them,
Mm-hmm.
but then we like they get to the wall, and then we just don't really hear about them anymore.
Yeah, it's like so of course this is the part of the that we're talking about. So like in the movie, they just kind of like traverse their way up, but in the book, it's a little more precarious. They're like very like very conscious of the fact of any noise that they're making being very quiet, because it has a much more ominous feel because we don't know what to expect. Like things are about to get really real. Like we're all pretty much assuming that Smog is still around, and so they're not trying to like alert him to their presence quite yet. And so they're with their ponies, and they do set up camp after they find they set up camp, and then also when they find the door, they set up camp directly under this kind of like hidden stair and passage up towards that doorstep that we see. And so usually it's like, I think it's definitely Beaufort. No, is it Bomber and Beaufort? Definitely Bomber, I think, stays with the ponies a lot of the time because he doesn't want to walk up that way or try to be lifted up, which he makes a point of saying that he's too fat
Oh
to
yes,
be
and
lifted.
then but it says, but Tolkien drops this random hint in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the chapter, and he's like, Bomber thinks he's too heavy for the rope, and it says the rope was actually strong enough, but we will get to that later. And I'm like, no, get to it now.
Yeah, we'll get to it later,
Get to it
Callie.
later.
There's no rushing this. But yeah, so he makes it up. Obviously, ponies do not get to the doorstep because it's just the way that it's described is so different. So of course, before we get to the door, we see the ruins of Dale. And I think that there's even more of Dale left in the movie than there is in the book. In the book it's just described as just some very few remnants of this town, and in both versions it's kind of Balin saying how this was like a vibrant, beautiful place at one point, and now it's very sad. I do like that they keep that. I did think it was interesting that they kept more of Dale, especially considering that we know that it was burnt to the ground by Smaug. So, not a big deal. I guess they just really wanted to make sure that you saw it. So we see Dale, and then Thorin is the one that kind of like hurries them along. Of course, when we actually see Dale, it's when like Balin and Bilbo and a couple others go on kind of a scouting mission, because they're trying to be very quiet, not really make anyone aware of their presence. So most of them stay at camp. They're still kind of looking for western side of the mountain, I believe, to find wherever the heck this magical hidden door is. So it's really just Bilbo, Balin, I think it's Keely and Feely, that go over to north towards the front, like the valley that's right in front of this mountain where Dale used to be, and they see the ruins, and it's very, there's like a crow cawing in the distance, and it's very, gives everyone kind of the EBGBs, and they're like, there's no point in being over here. We're not going to see anything helpful. So they skedaddle. In the movie, Thorin is very much like, it's nearly midday, it's Durin's day, we got to find this door before last light. Very different from the fact that we don't really know when Doran's Day is supposed to be in the book. Like, we know like the time of year and when it should land, but it's not like we're keeping the way that they do New Year's Day is very different. It's the last day of autumn, and I'm just kind of like, how would you know that with the way that like things change year to year? You know what I mean? And they definitely aren't sure based on, we've been in barrels part of the time. We were locked in a castle. I don't even know, like
Yeah,
a
no, we've been hanging out 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't really have that same like urgency or like sense of time anyway that they do in the movie. And I do understand why they keep it like that, just for like it would probably be kind of hard to explain in a that kind of setting, like, oh, you don't even know when your New Year's is, like, um So I get, but it is funny that he kind of like rushes them. He's like, all right, let's go. It's midday. We got to find the store by the end of the day. But again, in the book, they really are, Tolkien describes them really kind of like taking, just kind of exploring as much as they can and really struggling to find this door. So I thought it was pretty funny that when we actually do find the stairway, so basically I want to go to how it's described in the book quickly. 190 on my copy is like the little tiny version. So it says that feeling Kili and the Hobbit went back one day down the valley and scrambled among the tumbled rocks at its southern corner. About midday, oh, I get it. They have Thorin saying like it's midday. Creeping behind a great stone that stood alone like a pillar, Bilbo came on what looked like rough steps going upwards. Following these excitedly, he and the dwarves found traces of a narrow track, often lost, often rediscovered, that wandered on to the top of the southern ridge and brought them at last to a still narrower ledge which turned north across the face of the mountain. Looking down, they saw that they were at the top of the cliff at the valley's head and were gazing down onto their own camp below. Silently clinging to the rocky wall on their right, they went in single file along the ledge till the wall opened and they turned into a little steep-walled bay, grassy floored, still and quiet. Its entrance, which they had found, could not be seen from below because of the overhang of the cliff, nor from the further off because it was so small that it looked like a dark crack and no more. It was not a cave and was open to the sky above, but at its inner end a flat wall rose up that in the lower part, close to the ground, was as smooth and upright as mason's work, but without a joint or crevice to be seen. No sign was there of post or lintel or threshold, nor any sign of bar or bolt or keyhole, yet they did not doubt that they had found the door at last. Let's contrast this with what. And so, like, of course, this is also a big deal because it's Bilbo helps discover it. You have to be really looking for it, right? In the movie, we have a very elaborate carving on the side of the mountain. It's like a whole dwarf person with like a obvious kind of stair situation kind of carved into the leg up into the ledge. And now, of course, the way that they designed the door doesn't it there isn't no smooth as mason's work. It's really just it's like a lumpy side of a mountain like you would probably expect. But I was like, how am I supposed to buy that this is a secret if you
And,
have a giant dwarf
and
carved
they
into the
make like
side?
such a huge deal out of how
Thorin
keen
says
Mr. Baggins' eyes are.
yes.
I'm like, but there's like a whole.
I'm kind of like, how did you guys miss it? I'm like,
That's, that didn't make any sense to me either, Andy. Don't worry.
okay.
I watched
I was
that.
like,
What do you do?
I'm like, are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? Because that's like very obviously a structure.
Like,
They're
it's
like,
pretty huge, and it's
hello.
right there.
Yeah, like the door itself isn't obvious, but I think that the whole point was that none of it was supposed to be obvious. You weren't even supposed to know that there was a trail there. You know what I mean? So I thought that was a little silly.
It was, but wasn't it beautiful to look at? It's
I mean,
so cinematic. Wow.
I know. I wish they had kind of done something like that somewhere else, to show some like dwarven architecture. I know that we'll eventually get inside the mountain, but like I don't know, like at the mouth of the gate. They also don't really make a big deal about the steam coming out of the front gate. Like we see Dale and we're not really as close to the mountain quite yet. By the way it looks in the movie, at least that's how it came across to me. But really in the book, they're coming to kind of just see the front gate, see if there's any possibility of like if that's a way in. I don't think that they're really entertaining going in there, but they do make note, like they see the ruins down in the valley. They're not like right on top of it or anything, but they also make note of all this steam that's coming out of the front, where the river is kind of coming out of the entrance to the inside of the mountain. And I think Bilbo is a little concerned, like, oh my gosh, like Smog must be doing something. And then Balin is like, I'm pretty sure that it would always be like that, just because of the way that Smaug has made things weird over here, but I thought that would have been kind of cool. But they didn't really do it like that. But I do think that would have been a really nice shot. They didn't ask me. They didn't ask me.
Wasn't there at some point though that they were gonna send Bilbo in with his ring through the front door?
They
That was...
do entertain that idea, and Bilbo was like, are you
I'm
serious?
not a
Because
fan of that one.
yeah, because they're so frustrated by the fact that they can't find this door. But with the nature of the movie, they don't really spend time with the idea that they can't find it. Like, they tap on it and then like immediately give up. And Bilbo's like, you can't give up now. They're very okay with, not okay with, I mean, Thorin was clearly frustrated, but like they were all like, oh, we lost, because they did that with them knowing exactly the time that Durin's day was supposed to be. They were like, oh, we lost it. Whereas in the book, they very much spend a lot of time thinking through that, and Bilbo is just kind of like sitting there noticing the snails and like the grass, and I think it's Dwalin that's like, well, Bilbo's got a ring. We'll just send him in there. And Bilbo's like, I don't think so. And so when we actually do get the secret door, it's a moment where it is also, I feel like, another Bilbo moment, and they kind of make it a Bilbo moment in the movie. But another thing that was so strange to me, so like, of course, it's I do also like the way that they worded it in the book. Of course, they kind of change the way the timing of the door works. They make it more about the moonlight, saying like as if it's not about the daytime as the last light, but the last shred of moonlight that's supposed to hit the door. And it's not so much that the door reveals itself, but that it just pinpoints where that keyhole was. And I was like, oh wait, so you're telling me that like in the book, a fleck, like a flint of rock flies, like pops off of the door. Again, thinking of this flat mason work where there's no crack or crevice to be seen. In the movie, it just it directs its light directly on the keyhole, which is apparently there the whole time.
The whole time, if you had just like,
yeah, if you just felt
stuck
around
your
enough.
fingers in it a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, these dwarves in the movie, they give up way too easy. But in the book, it talks about the dwarves groaning as they think they've missed their chance, even though they're not totally clear on when the last light of Durin's day is. And then Bilbo kind of understanding before any of them what is happening. Bilbo is sitting there and he's kind of thinking about Gandalf. He's like hoping that the wizard will, Gandalf will come back soon. And it says if he lifted his head, he could see a glimpse of the distant forest. As the sun turned west, there was a gleam of yellow upon its far roof, as if the light caught the last pale leaves. Soon he saw the orange ball of the sun sinking towards the level of his eyes. He went to the opening, and there, pale and faint, was a thin new moon above the rim of earth. At that very moment, he heard a sharp crack behind him. There, on the gray stone and the grass, was an enormous thrush, nearly coal-black, its pale yellow breast freckled with dark spots. Crack! It had caught a snail and was knocking it on the stone. Crack, crack. And they do have the thrush show up, and Bilbo kind of notices it earlier when they're seeing Dale, and then obviously it comes back and only knocks very briefly in the movie, while Bilbo is kind of like reciting what the map says over and over.
So when the thrush knocks, do they only knock at night or something, or like when the sun goes down?
I think that it's like the bird has a much... It's interesting that it works out like this, because it's almost like the bird is just like, I'm gonna get this snail. Like, I'm hungry at this time of day. But it would... I mean, obviously it has to be... I'm sure the thrush knocks more than just that one time of year.
I was like, just when the sun sets, it's just,
yeah,
the thrush being like, okay, time to go knock.
I know. I mean, who knows? It's also interesting because, like, this is also, I'm 99% sure, left out of the movie, but that the, Bard and his lineage can understand thrushes, like what they can talk to
Oh.
thrushes. We haven't made it there, but it is interesting that there's also this tie with the dwarves, and I know that they had like a friendship with the ravens, of Raven Hill.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also like, there's just some bird stuff going on with Erebor. I don't know. It's never really explained, but I feel like it's the combination of like, probably the thrush gets hungry around this time of day, and so it
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
works. But then it's also the timing, you know. And it says at that, crack crack. Suddenly Bilbo understood. Forgetting all danger, he stood on the ledge and hailed the dwarves, shouting and waving. Now they aren't not there because they've given up. They're just kind of frustrated that they haven't found it. And, Bilbo has just been kind of sitting there gloomily while the dwarves have gone off to do their own thing. Earlier in like a page before this or so, they were talking about how it is the last week of autumn. They don't necessarily know it's like the last day. So suddenly Bilbo understood, and then he starts shouting and waving at them. And so those nearest come tumbling over the rocks as fast as they could along the ledge to him, wondering what on earth was the matter. The others shouted to be hauled up the ropes, except Bumber. Of course, he was asleep. Quickly, Bilbo explained. They all fell silent, the hobbits standing by the greystone and the dwarves with wagging beards watching impatiently. The sun sank lower and lower, and their hopes fell. It sank into a belt of reddened cloud and disappeared. The dwarves groaned, but still Bilbo stood almost without moving. The little moon was dipping to the horizon. Evening was coming on. Then suddenly, when their hope was lowest, a red ray of the sun escaped, like a finger, through a rent in the cloud. A gleam of light came straight through the opening into the bay and fell on the smooth rock face. The old thrush, who had been watching from a high perch with beady eyes and a head cocked on one side, gave a sudden trill. There was a loud crack. A flake of rock split from the wall and fell. A hole appeared suddenly about 3 feet from the ground. Probably good dwarf keyhole
Yeah.
distance. Quickly, trembling lest the chance should fade, the dwarves rushed to the rock and pushed in vain. The key! The key! Cried Bilbo, where is Thorin? And so then Thorin puts it in, and almost as soon as he puts the key in the keyhole, it fit, it turned, snap. The gleam went out, the sun sank, the moon was gone, and evening sprang into the sky. I love that. I feel like that would make a really good cartoon scene. So Thorin in the movie, he like pushes it rather than, and they also push here. They all push together, and slowly a part of the rock wall gave way. It wasn't just Thorin; like they all kind of had to put their backs into it to get the door to open, and that's pretty much where it ends. However, in this part of the movie, we also get Gandalf and Radagast showing up at Dol Guldur, and it's interesting. Like, of course, we have like Azog lurking about, and I guess there's a spell to where Gandalf can't see them, but Gandalf is doing a spell to try to have the evil in that place reveal itself. None of this is really in the book. There's some appendices stuff, and which I think we've talked about before. I also think it's funny that Radagast is like, "What if it's a trap?" And Gandalf is like, "It doesn't. Of course it's a trap. Undoubtedly, it's a trap." And I'm like, not really. Uh, Nobody. He didn't want you to show up there, but he shows up, and not so secretly. I think in the way that the appendices tells it is that he, in his search for what happened to Thrain, he ends up there and does find him, and that is true. That in the dungeons of Dol Guldur does Gandalf find Thrain kind of nearly out of his mind, and he was too far gone to really help him escape. In the movie, the way they explain how Thrain ended up there, we bring back up he has one of the last dwarvish rings, and of course the movie has drawn a tie between Azog and Sauron that wasn't really there in the book. So it's like from the war in Moria, as the movie explains, Azog doesn't kill Thrain, but he captures him for his ring. It's pretty much implied. And, and then they show that he chopped off the finger on which he was wearing the ring. And I was like, so, so you got the ring immediately. Why did you keep him? You know what I mean? Like, I think the idea in the book is more that, like, it was hard to get that information out of him, not just, like, openly wearing it like that. Why would you keep him? Like, why wouldn't you just kill him?
Unfortunately, I think just for funsies, but
I know, yeah, but it's also just kind of like, the chopping, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if he chop his finger off like that. I also noticed, I haven't noticed any other dwarves with facial tattoos.
no, I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, that they gave him to Thrain. And he had them in the war, so it wasn't like
Hmm.
Sauron did it or something. Like,
No.
he has had them through all the points that we've seen him in these kind of flashbacks. So, I don't know. I thought that was interesting because I don't really remember of any other dwarves in the films having these.
Not as distinguishable as that one anyway that I can think
Yeah, I
of.
don't remember Thror having them either.
No.
So I thought that was
Maybe
interesting.
maybe Thrain was just a little bit, extra and he just
Mm-hmm.
needed the embellishment.
I know. I
Maybe
would kind
he
of love if somebody who knows the movies, maybe they've talked about this at some point. But I would also think that if they chose that for Thrain, if they were some kind of symbolic, tattoo, like I know some native cultures have, once you've reached
Mhm.
a certain point, or you can get these, um, distinguish that you've done certain things or reached a certain point in your life. But we don't see other dwarves having that, so I thought that I would be interested. Of course, this obviously shows that I have not watched any of the appendices from the Hobbit movies. If Chris is listening, he will be moaning and groaning for shame.
If you have more information on this, please write to us and let us know
I know,
immediately.
because
Immediately.
found that really interesting, and I would have liked to see if they were gonna go that route. I would love to see it on more of the dwarves. I think that's pretty cool. I do love that they have Gandalf finding him, and he's so sad. Like, he's so apologetic. He's like, "I'm so sorry that I left you for dead." Like, I thought that was very sweet, and you could see
Mm,
that something isn't quite right about Thrain. Like, he thinks that the vines are snakes that are gonna keep. He's like, "There's no escaping." Like,
yeah.
so he's almost more like a prisoner of the mind rather than just physically captured. But
Yeah.
I also felt like the way that the book and the appendices explained his capturing was that it was such a precarious situation. Gandalf went in on a mission, on like an information, kind of covert ops situation, only to find Thrain. And of course, that's how he gets the map and the key and everything, and discovers that the ring is lost. Of course, the regular timeline, that happens much earlier, but in this is, they've shrunk the Dol Guldur stuff down, which we've talked about previously. So I think that's nice that they show him there, and how sorry Gandalf is about it, and he is trying to get him out, which I think is kind of satisfying for a movie audience. I know he doesn't get out, but I do like that they included that there.
I don't know why they had him skittering around
Yeah,
up
that was
top
weird.
there like a weird rabid squirrel.
It
I
was
was
almost,
like, what?
I think they wanted to give Gandalf a reason to do his, like, Theoden thing, like that he does in Two
That was
Towers.
definitely, yeah, Theoden thing. That's yeah.
But obviously he's a little more feral in this version, which it seems wild to, like, I guess, I don't know, like, from a Sauron perspective, I don't really think that you would just let people wander around like that. I feel like Gollum was a special instance of letting them go after being captured. And obviously they imply that he doesn't feel like he can leave, or kind of
Yeah,
outright say that,
yeah.
but and like almost like turning him against, like as if he's like guarding his own prison,
Hmm.
but with what they've done, and then Gandalf kind of undoes it a little bit. But yeah, I don't really see Sauron being the kind of guy that would let his prisoner, that he wander around like that. I don't know if he is that confident in what he's done to
Like
Thrain.
the yeah. I mean, I would be. Thrain seems pretty
Yeah,
far
he
gone.
is
Poor
pretty far
guy
gone.
at
I
that
know.
point.
I
Yeah.
know it is pretty sad, but I think that Sauron likes order and he likes surety. You know what I
That's
mean?
right. Surety. Yeah.
So he probably would have been. He was definitely under lock and key. But sure, Feral Thrain, we'll take it. We'll take it.
Just like.
Because I know that was weird. At first I was like, okay, there is an orc attacking him. I was like, no, wait, it is Thrain. I was like, whoa. I was a little confused at first when he like first tackled him and then like scuttered off. Um, but we knew that Azog and crew were also hiding, so um, it was interesting.
Just like on the floor below.
Yeah, they were like, he's gonna see us. And Azog is like, it's fine. I'm not worried. So then they kind of let them have their little Thrain Gandalf reunion moment. In this part, we don't really see the conclusion of that interaction quite yet, but even when it's like very off script with whatever they're doing with Gandalf, I'm just like, Ian McKellen, you're so good at being Gandalf. I don't even care.
Yeah.
So maybe that's how people feel about like the other parts that I do have a problem with. I'm like, okay, fine. You know what I mean? I get it. If you really love I get it with Gandalf, so I can see how that could translate to the rest of it. Obviously, I'm gonna still keep bringing up my issues because, but but when it is Ian McKellen, I'm like, oh, you just do your Gandalf thing.
Yeah.
Do it. You look so good in your hat.
Yeah.
So
I did notice at some point his beard is swishing and it is long enough to tuck into his belt. I don't know why
Oh,
we were talking about that the last time or something. I noticed that his beard is swishing around at some point when he's in Dol Guldur
good.
and it's like super long. And I was like, someone's paying attention to detail.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I also did think it was interesting that he has Radagast go send a message to Galadriel. Again, we're not. It is so interesting because we know in movie version, I'm talking movie specifically, how he says to Frodo, like, Saruman, head of my order, very wise, he'll know what to do. They're not really showing a lot of that trust that we know he had in movie Fellowship, in this Hobbit version of Gandalf. He goes to Radagast, he goes to Galadriel, he goes to Elrond. He kind of has been avoiding Saruman. And maybe it's a proximity thing. Like, we know Lothlorien actively kind of deals with the problems of Dol Guldur, and
Yeah.
so she is technically closer. So maybe that's the thing. I just do want to point that out, that we know that he shouldn't be totally untrusting of Saruman
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah, we shouldn't be at that point yet.
Mm-mm.
Interesting.
Yeah, but we've also talked about how the Hobbit kind of undoes certain things or undermines certain points from even movie Lord of the Rings. So maybe like a
Yeah.
non-point. So
Yeah, someone made that point in one of our recent episodes where if they had made the Hobbit, this Hobbit, which is
mm-hmm.
technically a prequel, if they'd made it first, it would have looked very different if they had done Lord of the Rings first, because
Yeah,
even with his like treating or curing or whatever of Thrain, we both said it was like, oh, it was a Theoden moment, like
mm-hmm.
so. But if we hadn't had the first three movies before these movies,
Mm-hmm.
they probably would have come out differently and probably more like accurate so to the timeline, like you're saying, like at this point chronologically we shouldn't have mistrust of
Yes.
Saruman, but for the audience because we've already lived the Lord of the Rings, we mistrust him already.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we shouldn't have that vibe
Yeah.
yet. So
So I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it because of that. And maybe it is just a proximity thing of why they wrote it that way. But I also know that like he's so self-referential to the previous movie. So I don't know. It could be both. It could be one or the other. But really, those were all my thoughts about On the Doorstep. I really do like this chapter. I think it is pretty short and to the point. Like we've read some passages. I really like the way that, we go about finding this magical door. And I'm really excited to see what happens next.
Yeah, especially in the movie when at least where I left off, it was Thrain warning Gandalf, like under no circumstances should anyone go into
Yes.
Erebor. And I was like,
Yes.
oh, does he know something? He knows something. Oh my god.
I know. I'm kind of getting the sense that there are so many points where in the movie they've taken Gandalf's canonical concern about the use of smog in this war that Sauron is definitely planning, and it feels like a lot of other people are picking that up on the potential that smog has, which isn't as vocal in the book or even in any points. It's really Gandalf's concern, but we're kind of showing that maybe, with Thrain and even Thranduil having mentioned the danger of smog, not just in the sense of like waking up a dragon, but how that might come into play in a bigger way. So I think that's cool. I think that this means that we will see smog next time. Which
is Smaug in his own title movie? Is
I think so. So the next chapter is Inside Information, which, if we all recall, is Bilbo going inside and getting some information. I'm sure we're also going to see more of Lake Town. I'm not really worried about that. I think that, like, of my immediate memories of the Hobbit movies, I distinctly remember liking, the points in the Shire, like when we introduced Gandalf. Riddles in the Dark. I love that scene. I think it's very fun to watch. I think Andy Serkis and Martin Freeman's performance is very good. And I also really like how they, portray Smaug and Benedict Cumberbatch's performance there. And of course, like, at the time, I was also so, like, in love with Martin Freeman and Benedict Cumberbatch together from Sherlock. So it was it was kind of fun. Like, they have good chemistry, even if they weren't necessarily, like, recording that in front of each other. So I'm excited. I love that scene. I think Smaug is very pretty. I think he comes out looking great.
Yeah, he does.
CG wise. So definitely some stuff to look forward to. I'm assuming we'll also get back to whatever's going on in Lake Town. But I'm not really concerned. Is there anything else that I missed that we didn't go over that, struck a chord with you while you were reading or watching?
I don't think so. I think we really discussed anything that I had noted.
It's pretty direct,
It is, yeah, which is nice, actually. It was kind of like a breath. Mm-hmm. Nothing crazy happening.
Exactly, not a big chunky one. We got the door mystery figured out. So we're kind of set up for some bigger events to unfold. Not unlike the chapter Short Rest.
Yeah.
Figuring out the mystery of the map. That was pretty much all that happened. And then we moved on to bigger events. So I feel like that's kind of what's about to happen.
Again. Yeah, Tolkien puts his little mysteries in nice little packages, and then you open it, and then you move on to the next package.
Yeah. Yeah. We sure do. But with that, that's been Talking with Friends. We're going to have some more fun stuff coming up. Of course, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. At the time of recording this, I do have neglected Twitter. Instagram still okay. I'm sure it'll be fine by the time have me look at it. Otherwise, you can also join us over on Patreon. I know that I have some extra stuff that we've recorded to release, as well as the notes and upcoming events. So be sure to join us over there. There are no tiers. It is open to whatever you would like to contribute, which I think is great. Really, more the merrier over there. It's just a place for us to put some extra fun stuff that we think you'd appreciate, that maybe not just like any old person on the internet might. But if you're a fan, I think you'll have a good time joining us over there, and we hope to see you soon.